Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. My name is Taylor. I'm one of the national market advisors here with Savvy STR Agents. I'm typically one of the first people that you'll talk to here doing a market match call to help you figure out which markets are going to be a good fit for your next investment. And today I have Michael Klein and Jennifer here, the experts in the Poconos of Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for joining in, guys. I'm excited to dive into this market. Michael, you've been great. We've definitely sent you a lot of people this year already. So excited to dive in and teach everybody about the Poconos. So thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks for. Yeah, we're happy to do it. And you have sent us a lot of people this year. I mean, I can't. It feels like there's more people coming every day that I can barely keep up with them.
I know, and this is definitely not going to help that situation. So get ready. All right, so I
We're
thought we
ready.
could start off simple and just kind of touch on like what brings people to the Poconos. Why do you see so many investors drawn to this market?
Yeah, so I think the Poconos is interesting in that it just has, in terms of a drivable vacation market, it has, I think, probably arguably the best location you could possibly ask for. Obviously, you're looking for people, a lot of people, a captive audience that are nearby, that are within a couple hours driving distance. And with us being 2 hours from New York City, roughly, depending on traffic, and 2 hours from Philadelphia, as well as, a lot of people in New Jersey and even further out along the East Coast, I would argue that you really can't find more population within that kind of sweet spot in any other vacation market. And to put that in context, even if New York City like didn't exist for a moment, like just forget it doesn't even exist. Just Philadelphia, I think, would make the Poconos a strong vacation rental market. But obviously, we have both, and so you kind of have a Venn diagram there, which just makes it super dynamic and a lot of really robust demand. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. We get over roughly 11 million overnight visitors. It's been a vacation spot for over 100 years. We've got a lot of infrastructure for tourists, like, four ski resorts, more actually, depending on how you define the geography. You got water parks, we've got, nature, we've got national recreation areas, state parks, and all again at the fingertips of somebody that's living in a very urban environment. And so I think that's kind of the convenience and just the proximity and the great location for a vacation market is what everything starts with in the Poconos.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You just want to
for
escape the
sure.
city. You just want to get out into nature. And I think for a lot of people that are coming out from the city, I remember one of my first experiences coming out here originally as a New Yorker was just like walking my dog out in the Poconos. And I think it was like my first trip out here and I looked up and I saw the sky and I saw all these stars. And it was like so foreign to me because we have so much pollution in the city. You don't see like all the stars, used to being in Times
Yeah,
Square and, everything all lit up. So it's like a
yeah,
simple thing, but you get to really enjoy the beauty of the world.
yeah. I think just you guys being in a very convenient location for all those people, easy to get to, even if they live in the city and they are looking to invest somewhere that's relatively close to them. I mean, I would say majority of the people that I talk to that are interested in the Poconos, it's because they live close by and it's an easy drivable location for them. So definitely agree with you guys on that. What would you say the like peak seasonality is in your market? Does seasonality affect occupancy or anything like that?
Yeah, so I would kind of, I mean, a lot of people answer this question. I think it's a little bit fuzzy, but I think if you really focus on kind of where the spikes are, because I think that kind of tells you where the peak season ends. So that one's pretty easy. I mean, and definitely summer is peak. That's when the kids are out of school, the weather's nice, people are taking vacations. And so the Poconos is no different there, right? Like summer weekends is, people want to get out of the city and get into nature and do something fun. So the summer by far, like you'll see kind of a 2 to 3 or even 4x kind of from July versus like maybe May. So there's a pretty huge stratospheric jump during the summer. December, believe it or not, is actually normally our third month for our short-term rentals, our third best month. And that's because you have, all the holidays stacked right on top of each other. So you get like 10 or 12 days at like peak rates. And so that's, believe it or not, is kind of the third biggest. The interesting thing is that, like, in a way, I think there's obviously ebbs and flow of demand. But in a way, the Poconos, I think, doesn't really have necessarily a complete, it doesn't have a season that, like, there's nobody coming out. Every single weekend, you're going to get people that are looking for cool experiences or to get out of the city. And so I think that's what makes the Poconos really interesting, and especially if you have a really attractive property, because that's who's, booking out every single weekend. And so I think you can, and obviously you have the ski season too, but our graph kind of looks like, it's normally you're bumping around through up until June where it starts to take off, but you can be cash flow positive in every single month, which I think is really attractive.
Yeah, got it. Awesome. So, what is the outlook for people who haven't already invested in this area? Is there still room for growth, or would you say that there's signs of like saturation or it being like an overly competitive market?
Yeah, I think it's still the Poconos is still at an interesting juncture to invest, because I think we've gone from kind of under the radar to really being a kind of a blue chip market. And so along with that difference in perception creates really what, you look for in investments and real estate investments is you have cap rate compression, right? So the values of properties are going up, and you can still stabilize assets at really nice cash flow. So I think if you are thinking about it in that way, it's a really good time to invest, because there's momentum, increasing momentum, and there's still kind of room to run both in terms of cash flow and appreciation. With that said, I think this is true of all markets. The entire short-term rental market is professionalizing, and the Poconos is no different. And it's come a long way just in the past, 3 or 4 years. So you really have to kind of have a complete package in terms of the experience, and do all the, execute well across, the experience that you're going to create for customers. But if you buy the right property, you set it up correctly, then I think the Poconos is probably, you could argue, one of the most attractive markets you can invest, because you're getting in right as you can see that momentum building.
Yes, definitely agree with that. So, since we're on that topic, let's talk numbers a little bit. I think that's probably one of the most common questions I get asked is, um, you know, what is the price point that you can enter your market at ideally, and what does that usually look like for the property?
Yeah, so I think, like, as I just mentioned, I mean, the prices are going up, right? So this is a change. This is kind of a moving target. But I kind of break it down. The good news about the Poconos is that you have, with so much demand and so many millions of people coming here every year, it's not like you have a diverse, set of customers coming, and and there are different ways to be successful in the market. And I always say you've got, like, an average property in the Poconos can do $50,000 of revenue. Not what most investors are looking for today, but still not bad compared to maybe another market out there. All the way up to $500,000 in revenue and everything in between. So with that said, I mean, I think, like, you're kind of, I would kind of bracket it in terms of who your, bedroom count, or who you're kind of catering to. So I think at the low end, you can get like a smaller property, probably going to be catered towards couples or families, and that's in like the 250 to 350 range. I think with those, what you get is you don't have to have a lot of square footage, but you do need to be price disciplined, obviously, because you're never going to do $150,000 of revenue with a two-bedroom. It's just not feasible. And then I think one level up from that is you kind of get into the 3 and 4 bedroom category, which is, I think, an interesting category. We might chat more about that. But then you're in that kind of like 350 to 500 range. And so, you can do well with that, but you have to be careful, because you're looking for, I think you're really trying to provide value, and to, again, provide that unique experience. And then up from there, I think this is probably kind of the hottest segment, but is the 5 and 6 bedroom category. So that's kind of catered towards a group. And there, people are really have realized that if you invest in those properties, you can do $150,000, $200,000 possibly if you have a pool. And so, those are kind of in the, I would say, I mean, they're in the 500 to 800 range, which is a big range, but it kind of depends on quality and size and, some of the other features of the property. But you can really invest a lot into those, which make them really attractive for tax benefits and for cash flow. And then beyond that, I mean, I think there's, this isn't like a luxury market, and certainly if you're looking at it primarily as an investment, you want to be price disciplined on your entry price. So over 800,000, we're kind of getting into like unique properties, lakefronts, new construction, maybe an indoor pool, stuff like that. So it's kind of a little bit more esoteric. And for those, I think you're trying to, but with that said, some of those properties are doing 250, 300, $350,000 of revenue.
Wow. Okay, cool. So, and breaking down that a little bit more, what would you say like inventory looks like in the Poconos?
Abysmal. I'm kidding. It's so it's a little cutthroat. I will say that. The good properties that come out, you do have to be ready to go and ready to put your offer in. And that's just, the game that we're dealt with right now. And, our investors, of course, they want something that is turnkey and ready to go. And some of the properties, they do require putting a little bit of muscle into it. Does that mean as some cosmetic design, looking to work with designers to really get that revenue going? Larger properties are, I think, more ideal with the higher bedroom counts that can sustain
Mm-hmm.
higher gains. And we do take a look at properties that can potentially bring in more bedrooms, have more ability for expansion potential. And then there are some more, we do see some new construction coming in, and that's exciting. So that's bringing in more potential for the Poconos, and we're seeing a bit more of a kind of an upscale kind of luxury vibe coming in more, and that's exciting to see. Of course, everyone wants lakefront and pools, and the development of that is coming into play, as well as developing in-ground pools, and that's pushing properties, I think, that are going to be more standout, and we're going to see things change in our market a little bit the next couple of years.
Yeah, gotcha. And since you said that like inventory, it's a little cutthroat in your guys' market, it's probably a good idea. And I try to relay this to a lot of the people I talk to that getting pre-approved with a lender before starting your search. So if you find something that you really love, you can jump on it and you're not going to have to wait for all of that process and potentially lose out on a good deal. Would you guys feel like that is relatively like good advice in your market, just
Absolutely.
considering, yeah, good to know.
100%. 100%. I mean, I think like I always tell people that. I always ask like, do you have, are you pre-approved? Have you figured out your financing? And normally they're like, oh, don't worry about that. That won't be a problem. And that's not actually why I even asked that question. It's more about, getting, like if you're going to make an investment, you want to have as much clarity around what your plan is that you're going to actually take. And so are we
Right.
putting 10% down? Or are we putting 20% down, right? Because that's going to affect which properties we look at. It's going to affect how
Right.
much, your cash return that we're modeling in. And then also just being ready. Like if you're actually otherwise ready to make an offer, when you see something, you don't want to be like scrambling and then talking to the lender and doing all this other stuff. You want to be actually talking strategy about what are we going to offer, how can we win this deal, what other due diligence we need to do. So you don't want to be like worried about do we have a pre-approval ready. That's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely wanted to touch on that because I find that I get that objection a lot, and I just thought that it would be good to mention. Awesome, thank you. So my next question for you would be, what really helps boost performance in your market? Like any tips for increasing the ADR or choosing the right type of property?
So yeah, I mean, I can, yeah, I think I kind of always focus on the three, like, major metrics that are going to influence your, what you're going to do, your revenue and also your ADR. But that's generally, that's your bedroom count. So I kind of think of that of like gravity of short-term rentals, right? Because, obviously bigger group is going to be able to pay more than a smaller group. And so within bedroom counts, we can kind of like, that's generally how we start. And I actually normally start with bedroom count as opposed to like location, because there's actually more flexibility, I think, in location in the Poconos than there is about, these three holy grail metrics. So bedroom count, number one, obviously the design, and then the amenities. And so on the design, I think, that's come a long way. I think the Poconos, it used to be that there wasn't great design, and so it was, kind of more of a second home market. And so that's a good opportunity to find properties that, are good properties otherwise, but they need that design uplift. And so maybe somebody bought it back in 2018 or 2021, right? And so, it's not, if a property, was last bought back then and that's when they originally set it up, unless an owner does a refresh, which most of the times they don't, it's going to need a design uplift. But that's the easy stuff, that's the fun stuff, so it's not like super stressful like a interior renovation. And then amenities, of course. I mean, amenities are, second to bedroom count. I guess that would probably be, like the biggest one. Whether it has, like we talked about, summer being peak season, so if it has a pool, that is going to put you in a completely different revenue band versus it doesn't, just because of being able to, market that private pool during the summer. And of course, all those other things, yard space, we're seeing, like Jennifer mentioned, we're seeing more in-ground pools get put in. Those aren't coming to the resale market yet, but eventually they will. And indoor pools being, the biggest one, which is a variation of the pool. In the Northeast, we don't have great weather, so if you have those interior amenities that are going to be good all year round, those are also really important. And so, and then that also, is similar to having interior square footage. So I see you really can't have enough like amenity space inside. So whether it's a game room, movie theater, place for kids to play. And so that's normally one of the big things that we're looking for in properties, is just having that space that you can add the things that you really are going to drive the revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you kind of just touched on all of that, but Jen, if you had to paint like the perfect picture of what like the ideal property would be in the Poconos, what would that look like?
If we're setting up for STR, it's not like necessarily the house itself, but it's the experience that you're creating for your ideal customer. So if you're setting up something for, let's say, a family, you want to have the game room, the hot tub, the children's play area. You want to create something that's memorable and that has this unique experience that's going to be something that the family is going to enjoy, and create experiences that they're going to, you know, enjoy, and create family memories that they're going to share. It's not just like the Instagrammable moments, but these sort of adventures that they go on and share and remember, so that they want to click book. So it could be any property, but it's what you're going to put into it, how you're going to craft that experience.
Yeah, I think that's probably like that could relate to any market really that you're looking to invest in. Like that's the key here to be successful for sure. So, what would you guys say, like overall, that how does the Poconos compare to other short-term rental markets? Like, what makes it feel different?
Yeah, I think the Poconos is maybe a little bit different than a beach market, or like a market that's kind of defined by one thing, where I think the Poconos is almost defined more about its convenience and proximity. Again, like going back to that first point about why the Poconos is in demand, is all that population nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, because it's like, people always ask that question, like, well, why are people coming here? Well, it's kind of like, well, they have to come here because it's the closest place that you can go, unless you want to drive 5 hours to Vermont to go skiing. But not everybody wants to drive 5 hours, right? And of course, there's all sorts of reasons that they go here, but it's not defined by any one specific thing. And I think if you think about it that way, it creates a lot of freedom around, about like crafting that experience that Jennifer was talking about, because you have that captive audience, and then you can kind of work backwards from like, what is our customer we're targeting, what are they looking for, and then how do we just create that. And so like, we're not going to run out of the Poconos isn't going to run out of like demand, it's not going to run out of people nearby. And so it creates, you've got the demand, it's more, it puts the ball in the court of kind of the short-term rental investor, like, well, what can we create to actually fulfill that demand in interesting ways.
Yeah, awesome. Um, so are so if people are looking to invest in the Poconos in 2026, Are there any like up and coming spots or hidden gems that you guys are keeping your eyes on for investors?
Yeah, I think one that I was just been thinking about recently is I think there's been so much investment going into these like big super properties, which are normally like the bigger bedroom counts, right? Because everybody's trying to get to $200,000 of revenue. But I think it's the 3 and 4 bedroom category, honestly, has been a little bit overlooked. And so if you look at the average 3 or 4 bedroom property, they're not, I would say the average isn't that great. And so I think there's an opportunity to kind of create like some of the things that we've learned from the super property and bring that to a more affordable price point, in a 3 and 4 bedroom category. Because if you have a really unique experience, people are going to book that. And if you go to AirDNA, it's actually quite surprising because most people show up in the Poconos are like 3 and 4s. No, I don't want to invest there. But if you go to AirDNA and just click 3 bedroom and look at and just start scrolling and rank by revenue, I haven't done the exact math. I probably should, but I think there's like over 100, if not like 150, maybe more properties that are 3 bedrooms that are doing over $100,000 of revenue. So I think that is a fantastic opportunity. And then, I mean, the other one that I've seen that's come up, I mean, is a lot of people are looking for in-ground pools because they've realized in the Northeast and some of these mountain markets, if you can create that all year swimming, that's just a huge unique that's a huge unique experience that a lot of people don't have. So I think also privacy, big backyards and things like that where you can create those sort of resort style amenities. But I think the other one that I don't think so those are a couple. I mean, the other one is just in general, this is a generic answer. Anywhere where you can find value, because I think, like I said, the Poconos is going through this cap rate compression cycle. And so if you can find square footage cheap, if you can find, land cheap, and you can stabilize that with something interesting, I think your investment's gonna do quite well.
Yeah, and I love what you said about you don't necessarily like need to have one of those super properties to perform at a high level, like because unfortunately not everybody can afford those properties. So this makes it an easier market for people that don't have a $1 million budget to actually succeed in. So that's awesome. So you have some data points to share with us, don't you, Michael?
Yeah, we have some case studies that we can walk through real quickly. Let me share my screen here. All right, so yeah, this is actually a good segue because this is, I think, a good example of one of those like 3 bedroom properties. Um, you know, got it at a great price. It was a property on an acre, so we're under $300,000. This is like maybe a year old, but anywhere you can find a solid 3 bed that doesn't need renovation, that's on an acre of land for under $300,000. Again, I think that creates that value that you're looking for. And then it's just a question of what you can do. And so I think these guys they're actually self-managing. I think they did a great job. They set it up themselves, which normally I kind of like I'm weary of, but they really put a lot of effort into it and didn't do anything crazy, but did a nice fire pit, did a nice kind of side yard, outdoor area, and this property is doing really great. I think it's like a top 10 or top 5% property. So yeah, I think this is, there's a lot, like I said, there's more case studies like this in the 3 and 4 bedroom. And I think we're going to see more and more as people kind of again, you learn from the best operators and then you look for these segments that are, under capitalized on. And I think a lot of good things can happen there. So this is an interesting one. And by the way, I kind of put these in buckets. The last one I would say is more of like a cosmetic kind of value add. So we're talking about design and amenities. This is actually in the turnkey bucket, which is very interesting because, you know, only until the past year or so have you even seen properties that were doing like, $300,000 of revenue ever come up for sale in the Poconos. And so this was a turnkey property. It was actually an interesting story because it was a 1031, and the buyer basically her mother, sorry, which was older, had a property in Hawaii that was earning like, I don't know, it was like 2% cash on cash. And they sold that property in 1031 into this property at, at basically like a 12% cap rate, which is amazing. Didn't do a thing, literally just sold the property 1031, and now they're getting checks, at 12% cash on cash. So it's almost like a fixed income instrument for somebody who's living on fixed income, which I thought was just such an interesting use case for a short-term rental.
Yeah, that is super cool. Beautiful property.
Yeah, I think what she said is I don't know the exact numbers, but I think she was basically traded like $2,000 checks per month for like 12 or $14,000 checks per month, which
Wow.
is a pretty good trade. Um, so this one I would kind of categorize in, it was definitely a value opportunity, but it needed a little bit more work because they actually expanded the septic and expanded the bedroom count there. So I think they went from a 3 or 4 to a 6 bedroom. So pretty big, but the rest of the house actually had a lot of square footage that didn't otherwise need a lot of renovations other than adding the bedrooms. And I think you see this time and time again in the Poconos. There's just so much demand for, a property that can really provide space and cater to a group or multiple families. And you have that all up and down at all different price points. And so this is one that is it's just doing really well. It's booked out all the time. I think they probably could increase their pricing a little bit. But they came in and, like I said, they added the bedrooms. They did like a playground inside in the garage, which is kind of interesting. I haven't seen a lot of those. It already had a hot tub, already had that fire pit out there. So it was mostly just kind of like design and inside and adding those bedrooms, and it's doing, amazing numbers.
Awesome.
And this was kind of in the lakefront category, which is obviously a lot of people. And I got to preface it with it is hard to find something like this because it's a little bit of a unicorn. It didn't really need a lot of interior renovations. It was on community sewer, so we actually went from a 4 to a 5 bedroom on it. Did a redesign of the property, and the only downside, I guess, was it wasn't a huge property. So really looked for every single little nook and cranny of square footage that you could finish out. And so this down here is the game room. So that was a garage that they converted, and then this was a little like basically an attic that they turned into this really cool kids nook, and obviously added some more, like added a sauna, did some landscaping in the backyard by the lake, and so basically went from like a 4 to a 5 bedroom, and then I can't remember, but the square footage was probably went from like 2,500 to like 2,900 square feet, and it also went from 2.5 bathrooms to 3 bathrooms. So just a lot of like strategic value add across the board to make this being on the lake such a great experience, and then allowing that to accommodate as many people as possible. This one's really cool. I mean, it was such an exceptional property. It it doesn't really show in the pictures here, but it was on 5 acres and was at the end of this cul-de-sac. So, when you're looking for, just such a unique feature in the Poconos to have that acreage, to have that privacy, and on top of it, wasn't in a community, also had an in-ground pool already, and also had a ton of square footage. So, I mean, this kind of like checks all the boxes for those value add type of opportunities that you can do. So these guys, they went absolutely nuts. I wish we had the after picture here, but I think this was an STR Cribs project. So the backyard, there's a pickleball court, fire pit, sauna. I mean, the whole thing. I guess the only other thing they could do here was really like add a pool enclosure if they wanted to, which they haven't done yet. But this one is getting really unique property, getting super high ADRs.
Awesome.
I think this is the last one, but this one has the craziest numbers. So we saved the best for
Oh my
last.
God, yeah, look at that ROI.
So I mean, yeah. To preface this, I mean, again, these don't come up very often, but and this did take a long time because they put a lot in the property in terms of he actually made this is actually has a pool enclosure now, like not a telescopic pool enclosure, but an actual indoor pool. And so there's been quite a lot of investment. I would say at least $300,000, if not more. But the revenue, they took the property, I think, from a 4 bedroom to an 8 bedroom, and it had a great lot. So it's on about 4 acres, super private, had the in-ground pool, had these like soaring ceilings, amazing game room. And so they really just came out, and I think it's such a unique property because it's like 6,000 square feet now with the garage that they converted. And so I just imagine, like, it looks like a mansion, right? If you're coming from New York City and you're like a 500 square foot apartment and you come to a 6,000 square foot property with like 28-foot ceilings, I mean, and also to have a property where everybody, right, can fit in there comfortably and have, make memories and stuff, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, that is it definitely looks like a mansion for sure.
Cool. I think that's
Okay, awesome. So I had one more question for you, and you or Jen can answer it. If you guys were personally investing in your market this year, what would you personally focus on? Like, what's that top thing that you would be looking for?
Well, I think looking for space for amenities, like inside the house, like making sure that there's room for a game room, a movie theater, like extra living space to increase bedrooms. Because it is difficult to find, I would say like 5 and 6 bedrooms in this area. So if there's a way to increase it, let's look for that. And of course, you want to have all the great amenities. So looking to either put a pool in, making sure that we have a hot tub, sauna, maybe even a court. Pickleball's getting hot. People are asking for that. Maybe even a little putt putt. Having lots of fun amenities to keep people, hitting the book now. Come and stay. Looking to create something that's like a unique experience. So looking for things that are different from what everyone else has. So I was touring this one house recently and it looked like they had like the secret little room. I don't know if it was like a panic room or something or an escape hatch. And and to me, I was like, oh, this could be fun. This could be something different. So you never know what something could turn into.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
Awesome.
other things I would add to that are just, I think, always really trying to understand what is going to be defensible and how things are going to age. And real estate's a long-term investment, so like we don't have to sell it next year, but because time actually does a lot of that work. So thinking about things that in 5 years' time are going to actually put you in a position to sell that property for a lot more and reposition into something else. And so I think you have to find those things that are differentiated and kind of defensible. And I think like that there's a little bit of a trap there because sometimes you can focus so much on cash flow, but it can cash flow today, but you also want to think about, where you stack up in the market and how is that going to actually allow you to do well over a long period of time. So that's something that I mean, that's honestly where we kind of bring that local market knowledge and nuance because otherwise you can't really put these things in context. The Poconos is quirky, whether it's not an HOA, how big the lot, what the privacy is. It's hard for you coming from out of town to really understand how unique something is or how differentiated it might be.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important for people when considering investing in a certain market to have somebody like you guys, a local expert that knows exactly what to look for. That's why it's so important. So thank you guys so much for being here. If I'm going to open up the chat for anybody that has any questions that we didn't answer today, feel free to put them in there.
So Maggie, I think, has a good question here. So yeah, she asked about like submarkets without HOAs. So I mean, the reality is that most of the properties are in communities of different sorts, and so I think understanding the community is really important, just in terms of what the fees are, what the restrictions. Some are better than worse, and regardless, you always want to make sure like you're underwriting the fees, right? And making sure like if you want to add a pool and that community doesn't add a pool, then like you got to pass on that property and look for something else. But I think so yeah, I think it's just there's not really like a sub market that doesn't have HOAs, but there's a couple areas that have less likely to have HOAs. And so there's places in like Middle Smithfield Township, which is a little bit more, it feels more just rural, I guess. It's not really that much further away. Barrett Township also has some properties without HOA. And there's a couple more. I think a lot of times to get outside of the HOA, you kind of have to make a trade off. And so sometimes you're going a little further out. Versus if you look at like, the center point of like which is normally like Camelback Ski Resort, and you're looking there, most things, a lot of times you have to go a little bit further out to find something, without an HOA or that has a little bit more land. But I mean, yeah, if anybody wants to obviously get in touch, I think the calendars are shared there, or you can reach out to Taylor and get matched with a market. So yeah, we're happy to chat and dig more into market.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining. The links are in the chat for booking a call with us. So thank you so much, guys, for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.